Ethiopia. One of the only countries that resisted European colonialism in the 19th and 20th century, going as far as humiliating the Italians back in 1896. That was until a certain baldy spaghetti man came in with some funny looking gas and wiped Ethiopia from the map. But what if we could change Ethiopia's fate? Well, that's what I'm going to do by getting all the new achievements for Ethiopia and the new Hearts of Iron 4 expansion by Blood Alone. So, Ethiopia. As we know, Ethiopia starts at war with Italy in 1936. As you may expect, this conflict is certainly not in Ethiopia's favor, but should you manage to win, you can push for greater things, especially the achievements that were added with the new DLC. The new achievements for Ethiopia are as follows: force the Italians to make peace without being a faction, form the African Union with 13 African members, as communist Ethiopia take all the states that border the Red Sea, as the Emperor, declare yourself the King of Kings and take Kenya and Tanzania, and finally take Jerusalem and move the capital there. There are a lot of achievements in here and it pretty much requires you to play multiple playthroughs just to get them all, so let's us not waste any more time. But first, we need to win a war, so for the first playthrough we will be sticking with the Emperor as it's the most common path. Now, the situation is pretty bad. Your troops are way worse than those of the Italians. They have better templates, more technologies, and they're fully equipped compared to your troops, with the last detail being our biggest hurdle. So instead, let's fight on our own terms and use the natural geographic situation to our advantage. By retreating to a more defensible position in both fronts, it's just a matter of constantly reinforcing the losing battles. But early on you will have another problem. Italy will try to annex the small nation that starts in northern Ethiopia. If you're playing on historical, sometimes they might refuse and now you have some extra troops even if you technically don't control them. But by the same token, should Italy annex them and you take their victory point, you could get a free military factory, so it's just a matter of luck really. As the Emperor you have two choices, either stay and fight or go abroad, take the train to the League of Nations. First, let's cover the League of Nations path, as it's the easiest way to win the war with Italy. First, before anything, you have to ask asylum in either the UK, Germany, Sweden or Japan. It really doesn't matter right now which country we choose, but remember this little fact for the end of the video as it will be quite important. With the government in exile, we can finally flee to the League of Nations and start some new mechanics for the war. As time passes, this thing called war escalation will keep going up, and basically the longer the war takes, the worse is for Italy. But returning to the front, if you see that your lines are just breaking some places, even after relocating, just retreat further into the mountains. Also, you should hire some military advisors, as the bonuses they can provide really help defending some of the trickiest styles to hold. As the war keeps escalating, some focuses will be unlocked, such as being able to buy guns. This is especially important as the biggest problem with the army is that we don't have enough guns, so if you fully equip your troops you may even be able to push the Italians back and maybe even encircle them. There are a few other things you can do, such as requesting the closure of the Suez Canal for Italy, but the best thing is to recruit some volunteers. With this you can easily push Italy back into Eritrea and Somalia. Should this happen, Italy has the option to offer peace, and if you manage to control either of the 3 colonial provinces they own, you will get them in this peace offer. You can refuse the offer, but this specific route, you can only push for a white peace in the League of Nations, so if you get the offer by Italy, just take it. And with that, the first achievement has been unlocked. But before starting another playthrough for the rest of the achievements, we can get this time for Africa 1. By going down the rest of the Emperor's focus tree, we can take the focus towards African unity, and what this will do is create a faction and enables you some decisions to support resistance groups in any African province. As should all the provinces of any African nation get to 90%, they will revolt against their colonial overlords. Once they rebel, you can push for their overlord to recognize their independence. If they say yes, they peace out and the African nation joins your faction. If they say no, you can join the war, bringing the African nation into your faction, or you can refuse to join the war. Most of the times they will actually say no. For example, in this case, France can't get to me, so I'd say join the war just so you can get this achievement faster. Be warned that if you increase the level of resistance in one state, but it then gets occupied by one of your boys, the game will freak out and consider it as if they revolted against the occupier that revolted against the overlord and not the owner, this time being France. So just keep that in mind if you're going for this achievement. You don't want to waste like some precious African nations joining France in this case. Also, should these nations capitulate, thanks to the legitimacy mechanic, you can get off map factories and industrialize Ethiopia fairly quickly just by doing this. Anyway, showing this process 13 different times would be quite long, so just skipping right until the very end, I got the achievement after Madagascar revolted and I joined the war to defend them. Not a difficult achievement really, just a tedious one for how long it takes, but now on to the next achievement, which is actually kinda painful. For next one, we will be doing the communist one. For this, if you're playing in unhistorical, I recommend to set the Soviets to stick to historical focuses, as if they go down the Trotskyist or the Tsarist path, they will most likely not support you as they are preparing themselves for a civil war. After starting up the game, I quickly rushed down the communist path that gives you some nice army bonuses, and quickly overthrew the emperor. After that, you have the choice of going down the anarchist path or the full communist path. And while going anarchist sounds nice, becoming full communist is going to help us a lot, as we can ask the Soviets for help with one of the focuses, allowing us to get 10,000 free Soviet rifles. As I was preparing for my counterattack, Italy decided to have a civil war of their own and go communist. This was great, and so I quickly secured the most important state, that being Eritrea, as we needed for the achievement and for some later stuff. In the peace deal, I got Eritrea and transferred some of the Italian ships for some naval invasions I had planned. One thing you should keep in mind is that the little nation in northern Ethiopia, should it get annexed by the Italians, during the civil war it will be transferred to the Italians instead of the fascist Italians, and as you will be seeing later, this can really fuck up your game. Anyway, with the port secured, I justified in Yemen and launched a naval invasion. That failed miserably. So, as I was having troubles with Yemen, I decided to instead focus up north, as you can get a war goal on Saudi Arabia with a focus. So I launched another naval invasion, and this time it worked, but I quickly realized I was getting no supplies as my capital was not connected to the port in Eritrea, so I had to wait until the railway was finished to push the Saudis. Yeah, remember to build that railway, you don't want to get the same problem as I had here. After it was built, defeating them was easily done, and I took the states required for the achievement. Meanwhile, I puppeted the rest. Yemen was defeated afterwards, and now I just had to build up before even attempting to fight Mr. Oswald Mosley. During this time I had joined the Comintern, but the Soviets were getting their butts kicked by the Germans. So in the most Italian way possible, I betrayed the Soviets, declared war on them and joined the Axis so that not only I could leech off of their stockpiles of equipment they had, but also I could use Germany in the war against Mosley. But hey, I didn't just take their equipment, as I actually contributed. As I gave Germany manpower so they could well, how do I say this? Just so that YouTube doesn't demonetize me. Pacify their occupied states. A few months passed and I managed to annex Somalia from doing the focuses to invest in the Horn of Africa, and at this point I was almost ready to declare war on the Brits, but before I could do that, Portugal, that united with Brazil, declared war on Uruguay, the same Uruguay that was guaranteed by the US, and because Portugal was in the British faction, this meant Mosley was now at war with America. So I used this opportunity and quickly declared war on Britain for Egypt. I actually tried to calling the Germans into the war, but they wouldn't join, so the idea of using them for the war went out the window. But by this point my army was quite capable thanks to developing all these years and steamrolled the British troops in Africa. With the Horn of Africa under my boot, I formed one of the new formable nations, getting the course on the rest of Eritrea and Somalia. My troops beat the British back in both Egypt and Palestine, finally linking up with each other, and before long the achievement was mine. Now I only needed 2 more achievements, so up to the next game. The next game. Well, as you see, Italy had a civil war and won the war, taking. But in this case, I actually took Somalia and Eritrea in the peace deal. But remember the small detail I said about the other Italians getting Hausa, the small little nation in north of Ethiopia? Well, because of a certain focus, they can decolonize and release their colonial states as puppets. But because Italy still had Hausa, the game thought that Italy controlled Ethiopia and puppeted me as a result, turning me into a democratic nation. So even if I broke free from Italy, I was now democratic, severely limiting my options for warfare, as democracies suck in this game, and I would not get the glorious portrait for the emperor that he gets later on. So because of a bug, I got cocked out of a pretty lucky playthrough. Thanks, Paradox, I fucking hate you, test your fucking shit. So I restarted, and this time the Emperor stays, meaning you effectively decide to do this war on hard mode, as you don't get any international support. And the bonuses you get are worth jack shit, as you barely get any guns really. So yeah, doing this is quite problematic. But you see, something weird happened. When Italy tried to annex Hausa, nothing happened. No war, no annexation, no nothing really. I think the game bugged out here, but hey, I was not gonna complain, as I was burned out of playing Ethiopia by so many failed attempts by this point that I will not be showing in this video, because if not, this would make this video really long. This made the war considerably easier, as the front was way smaller now. And so, after grinding the Italians a bit, I started my great counteroffensive up north with the help of some focuses that give you some nice buffs for pushing into Eritrea. The breakthrough was a success. I destroyed all the Italian divisions in Eritrea and quickly moved to destroy the last remaining troops in Somalia. Again, the offensive was a success, and now Italy decided to offer a peace deal. Normally, in this case, I would accept since I now had Eritrea. But exclusive to this path, if you push the Italians completely out of the Horn of Africa, you can send a peace offer to them by taking all of their possessions in the Horn of Africa. So instead of taking the Italian deal, I just sent my deal to them and they accepted. So after that, I proceeded to annex Hausa, and as I was reforming my army, that was when all hell broke loose, as well, Italy and France just declared war on Britain. Oh, but it doesn't stop there, folks. Days later, the US also declared war on Britain. And why, you may ask? Well, to be fair, I really don't know, but looking back on the save game, I think what happened was that Britain left the naval treaty, and because Britain refused to rejoin the treaty, everyone that was inside the treaty just declared war on Mosley. Man, Mosley really can't catch a break, can he? Things got spicier as Italy joined Germany, and because now Germany joined the war, France proceeded to join the Axis as well. Seeing the current chain of events, I said screw it, and I immediately justified for Kenya, but before going to war, can't we just appreciate the Emperor's sick new portrait that he can get? Anyway, I declared war on the Brits, joined the Axis for good measure, and rushed to occupy Kenya and Tanzania for the achievement. But the British quickly reinforced the front, so after some forced attacks, I pushed the Brits out of Kenya and got the achievement. Now I just needed Jerusalem, so it's finally time for my final trick and form the Empire of Solomon. To form it, you just need to have Jerusalem basically. So after trading with the French some territories, I got Jerusalem from them and formed the Empire of Solomon. At this point, you would get a decision to move the capital to Jerusalem as it becomes a core, or that's what I would be saying if it were not for the fact that you need to own the damn state. So yep, that meant invading Britain. As I was waiting for anyone to get air superiority so I could airdrop into London, I left the game as it was getting quite late. The next day, I continued where I left off, but then the Dominican Republic joined Britain. And why is that important, you may be wondering? Well, it's important because it crashed the fucking game. Yep, the shitty Dominican Republic would crash the game every single time, making this save game now unplayable. Paradox! So that meant I would need to restart, and meaning I would need to redo this all over again, right? Well, not exactly. If you remember, earlier in the video I said that you should keep an eye out for the nation you would ask for asylum if you went for the exile path. Well, if you ask for asylum in Britain and they say yes, and should you get enough legitimacy, you can ask the Brits for control over Palestine, and since it becomes an own state by that point, you actually get the decision to move the capital there. So, knowing this, I started a new game, exiled myself to Britain, but just after grinding the Italians and doing some focuses, as I would not be able to do some of them later, I decided to leave the capital wide open and capitulated, and I was now in exile. And let me tell you, this path is actually quite fun. You get some neat little mechanics, and this reminds me of that Polish video I did last year that you should watch after this video, shameless self-sponsor over. But by this point I was burned out on Ethiopia, so I just rushed some focuses, raised my legitimacy, and just as World War II started, I forgot to mention this was on historical, I asked the UK for Palestine. It's worth mentioning that this is pretty much 50-50 on whether the UK says yes or says no to getting Palestine, but thankfully they accepted. But I noticed that Palestine was still not mine, and that's because you only get those territories once you reclaim Ethiopia and you are no longer in exile. So after helping the Brits reconquer Ethiopia, I was no longer in exile, Palestine was transferred to me, and finally I could change the capital to Jerusalem, getting the last achievement. And that was all the achievements for Ethiopia. I really hope you enjoyed the video, because I surely did not enjoy a single bit getting these achievements. Well, hey, all for that juicy 100% in Steam, right? That I've held even before La Resistance came out. Yep, it's been that long. Next video it will be all about the Italian achievements and how I got them as the Pope live in this channel. If you would like to see more content similar to this one, remember to subscribe, as this really helps out the channel. I try to live stream every Friday if you're interested in joining me live. This was the Factus Expert, you as dismissed soldier.